Welcome to Today Before History podcast. Today, January 27th, the world marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day. But today, I want to take you back exactly 81 years to a cold Saturday afternoon in 1945 in the heart of occupied Poland. Imagine a landscape of thick snow and the silence so heavy it felt physical. At 3 p.m., the scout of the Soviet 100 Infantry Division reached the gates of a place they had never heard of. One of the first to enter was a Jewish Soviet colonel named Anatoly Shapiro. He later wrote that even after years of brutal war, nothing prepared him for this. He saw soldiers, hardened men who had survived the bloodiest battle of the Eastern Front, simply collapse into snow and weep. Shapiro describes seeing children with vacant eyes, living skeletons, who didn't cry or laugh. They just stood there in a stench of death that no words can describe. The soldiers tried to hand out bread, but the survivors were so traumatized they didn't even reach for it. They thought it was just another cruel trick. But to truly understand why these survivors were in such state of shock and why the camp felt so empty yet so heavy, we have to look at what happened just 10 days before the first Soviet soldier arrived. On January 17th, Auschwitz turned from a ghost city into an open graveyard. The Nazis knew the Red Army was close, and they wanted to erase the witnesses. In the peak of the Polish winter, they forced 56,000 prisoners out of the barracks and into a forced march toward Germany. These people were dressed in rags and wooden cloaks, marching through knee-deep snow. The rule was simple and barbaric. If you couldn't keep up, if you stumbled, if you were too weak to continue, you were shot in the head on the spot and left by the side of the road. Thousands died in those few days. The 7,000 people the Soviets found on the 27th were only the leftovers. Those so sick the Nazis assumed they would die of cold or hunger within hours. The liberation was, quite literally, a last-minute rescue of the people the Nazis had already given up on. Among those left over, the ones the SS thought weren't even worth the bullet to kill during the march, was a group that no soldier, no matter how battle-hardened, was prepared to face: the children. Perhaps the most haunting sight for the liberators was the children. There is a famous photograph we all know, a group of children in a striped uniform standing behind a barbed wire fence on the day of liberation. But behind that photo is a chilling story. Most of those children were Mengele twins. They had survived only because Joseph Mengele used them for his monstrous medical experiments. When the Soviet soldiers entered, these children didn't run to them. They stood in total silence. One survivor, who was a small girl at the time, remembered that when a Soviet soldier tried to hug her, she instinctively showed him the number tattooed on her arm. She thought he was there to check if her number was still valid. It took hours for the soldiers to convince these children that it was safe to come out into the sun. But as the children were slowly led out of the darkness, the soldiers began to move deeper into the camp's structures. What they found there wasn't people, but the terrifying physical evidence of where those children's families had gone. They stepped into the warehouses. The Nazis had burned 29 warehouses to hide the evidence, but the six that remained revealed the true scale of industrial murder. Inside, the soldiers found 7,000 kilograms of human hair, packed in sacks, hair shorn from victims to be sold to factories. They found 348,000 men's suits, 836,000 women dresses, and tens of thousands of pairs of shoes, including thousands of tiny shoes belonging to babies and children. But the most disturbing find was the Totenbuch, the death books. The Nazis kept meticulous bureaucratic records. They recorded names and dates, but next to each entry, they wrote a fake cause of death, like heart failure. The horror wasn't just in the killing, it was in the cold administrative order of it all. This administrative order, this efficiency, created a specialized kind of trauma. The survivors' bodies had been systematically broken down for so long that when the end finally came, the very thing meant to save them became a new kind of threat. In the weeks following the liberation, thousands of survivors died because of the help they received. Soviet doctors encountered a phenomenon they weren't prepared for, the starvation paradox. When they gave the survivors heavy rations, like sausage or chocolate, their bodies simply collapsed. Their digestive systems had shut down after years of famine and could no longer process fats. In the first month of freedom, nearly 2,000 survivors died inside the liberated camp. The, they survived the gas chamber, the hunger, and the SS, but their bodies couldn't survive their first meal of freedom. When we look at this totality, the mass starvation, the stolen property, the children, and the sheer scale of the crime, we begin to understand why this specific place, out of all the hundred of camps across Europe, became the one we can never forget. So, why has Auschwitz become the ultimate symbol? It's because Auschwitz was a unique and terrifying hybrid. Unlike Treblinka, which was a pure death factory where almost no one was meant to survive more than a few hours, Auschwitz-Birkenau was both a mass extermination center and a sprawling slave labor camp. When the trains arrived at the selection platform, the Nazis divided humanity into two. Most were sent immediately to the gas chambers, but a small percentage were kept alive to work as slaves. Because of this dual system, thousands of people lived inside the machine for months or even years. They saw the smoke, they smelled the air, and they understood exactly how the factory worked. Auschwitz became our mirror because, unlike the pure death camps that the Nazis managed to flatten and hide, Auschwitz was too big to disappear. We have the testimonies of those who lived in the shadow of the chimneys and survived to tell us what they saw. We remember Auschwitz because it is the place where the industrial crime left fingerprints that could never be wiped away.